Welcome to the second hour of Fixing the Nation, one conversation at a time. It's Eric Latif, Janet Bogwa, and Mariam Bishar. And for the next hour, we want to ask ourselves, how safe is our data, especially our data that's in government hands? Of course, when you're born, the government already keeps your data. It registers you. You've been born of these parents in this particular facility, and so on and so forth. You go on ahead and open a business, then you also apply through the government, which gives you a business permit and a business license, and then it also, records your business. If there's a breach into any of those systems, like we have seen recently, what happens to that data? And specifically, the business registration service was in the news recently because there was a breach into the business registration service. And apparently what was being reported was that those who had hacked into that system were selling people's data. For how much? 10 bob. Watakujua company ni nani? Leta 10 bob nikuuzie. There's an Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, which is established by law to protect our data, not just with government, but everywhere where we go. And the commissioner is Immaculate Kassait. She's our next for the next hour. We'll be getting into that conversation with her shortly. First, you know what we do at the beginning of every hour. We track what the newsroom is tracking, our news fix. Mariam, what do we have?
Things happening in global politics. A dramatic collapse in the Kiev and Washington wartime alliance has played out publicly since an Oval Office clash between President Zelensky and President Trump last week. It crescendoed with the Ukraine's top ally, which is the US, suspending crucial military aid. I think we all saw that, what should I call it?
Drama.
Yeah, it's not a conversation. It was just a shouting match between President Zelensky and President Trump, as well as Vice President J.D. Vance. And they were just going at each other and back and forth. The U.S. saying the Ukraine is ungrateful, and the Ukraine trying to push back. I don't know if global politics have become less respectable in the era of Trump. I don't know, because I can't remember growing up ever seeing two leaders go head to head on national TV and just shout at each other and be like, no, you're ungrateful, no, you're not helping.
Maybe this is what happens behind closed doors, and it's important.
It's now coming out.
And it's important for us to see. When we hear talks have broken down, we are assuming
this is it, actually.
Oh, they've not agreed, and then one walked out. Kumba, this is the kind of thing that goes on.
They were shouting at each other.
It's true. We need to see it in all its entirety. So I think it was important.
Interesting. It's an insight into the world, because you think of a president, a leader, and you're thinking, that's a person who's, operating at this level.
They've created this aura about themselves. They are humans like us. It's good that we see them fighting.
And
Wangerushiana makombora, one or two jabs. Yeah. Immaculate Kassait, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Karibu sana. This is where we fix the nation.
Show up here, but Ash Wednesday,
Yes, actually, it's Ash Wednesday from today. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
To Fixing the Nation, a conversation at a time. And this one is about the job that you have been given by the law, and you've been employed by taxpayers to make sure that you protect our data.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, we'll be asking you what you do and what you've done in areas where there have been reported data breaches or complaints of data breach, and what your office is mandated to do. But before we get there, Jano Makots here has a quote. Just listen to her. She will give us a quotable quote from people who have said things in the past. Today's is I find it particularly hard. I have absolutely no idea. But just listen. She'll give us a hint of who the person is, the quote itself, and then she'll ask us who said that.
Right. Maybe I could have given more hints. But this person has been at the forefront of really amplifying messaging around ending femicide. She led the first massive End Femicide March in January of 2024. And maybe the last hint I can give, just to bring us home, is that she's also the founder of Usikimia. So I'll say the quote and you'll see whether or not you know the name. Silence is not an option when it comes to domestic violence. Who said that?
Silence is not an option when it comes to domestic violence. Founder of Usikimia, led the End Femicide March last year, very much Kenyan, very much around. You can see the face.
Yes. You can see it.
You can see the face. It's the name that's there. Okay. Give us the first name.
Jerry.
Jerry,
So close.
Migwi.
Jerry
Migui,
Migui.
yes.
Jerry
Yes.
Migui.
Yes.
Right, in advocacy campaigns addressing domestic violence in Kenya to encourage open discussion and action against domestic abuse. That's in the context that she said that.
Yeah, yeah. It's what do you think of the quotes? What do you think of what she said?
I totally agree. I totally agree that when you become silent, you're then giving power to those who actually abuse women. And they should be, in our modern age, there should be no place.
Right.
Yeah, for domestic violence. Yes, and we should encourage speaking out. Because that way, then you don't know it, but you're protecting your next door neighbor. But more importantly, I think as a society, we must snap out from silence because these people have neighbors, and unfortunately, we stopped being your neighbor's keeper, and we don't talk about it until they will tell you, "Tulikuwa tumesikia." I think we need to speak up. Yes,
Because silence means you're complicit in
Yes,
many
correct.
ways. So silence is not an option.
Yes, indeed. So, in terms of our data and data protection, we have made a couple of strides as a country. Our constitution enshrines the right to privacy, laying the groundwork for comprehensive data protection. In 2016, we had the Access to Information Act, which focused on freedom of information, but indirectly highlighting data transparency. And then in 2019, the Data Protection Act was enacted. And in 2020, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner was established to oversee enforcement of data protection laws. And the mandate of your office of the Data Protection Commissioner is derived from the Data Protection Act to regulate the processing of personal data, to ensure processing of personal data is guided by the law, to protect the privacy of individuals, to establish legal and institutional mechanisms to protect the data, and provide data subject with the rights and remedies to protect their personal data. We have given our data to various institutions and entities, including we're going onto social media and just putting our names and our birth dates and sharing a lot, but also at government level. And this is why the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner was established. It was at the height of the pushback against the rollout of the Huduma number. And the concern there was we are rolling out the Huduma number and sharing a lot of data, including biometric data, without proper safeguards. And the office was established. Earlier this year, Ms. Immaculate, there was a reported breach at the Kenya Business Registration Service, which compromised sensitive data of significant shareholders, including IDs, residential addresses, telephone numbers. That was on January 31st. The stolen information was reportedly being sold in the dark web. And then later, this was reassessed, but BRS collaborated with the cybersecurity experts to assess the extent of that breach. Number one, were you aware?
According to the law, the BRS is supposed to report to the Office of the Data Commissioner within 72 hours, and they did report to the office. So we can say we are aware of that data breach.
Okay.
Yes.
So what happened? What did they tell you?
They say, in their correspondence, they basically say that they have experienced a data breach in their system. And of course, according to law, they say they are doing what is necessary to address the concern. So having reported, what then? I think the question should then be, what do we do as an Office of the Data Commissioner? I would say it's still early in the days to give details, but we have embarked on an investigation. One, there's a multi-agency, because you see, it's not just a data protection breach, it's also a cybersecurity issue. And our role as an office is to make sure that when this happens, we, one, seek further clarification from the office, to embark on an investigation. Allow us, because also when you're in the middle of an investigation, you don't want to embark on, explain what is happening. It suffices to say we're on top of it in terms of finding out what exactly happened. Yes. Because this is not data locally, it's also a company that is based outside the country. If it was
who's the company based out of the country? The offender.
Yes, which is based out of the country. That would require mutual legal assistance, collaboration with those organizations, but it's something we're investigating actively as an office. Yes.
Has anything this major happened before? Anything?
but not reported to us as an office, not of this nature. Yeah, not of this nature. We receive many reports on breaches. Even you'll be surprised on a monthly basis, both private and public, once or twice. But they report to us, but not of this nature.
So this is a bit of like uncharted
It's uncharted waters, but it's not unusual.
Okay.
Yeah, we've seen it even global as a trend. We've seen cybersecurity as a real emerging issue. In fact, the challenge is whether we are well equipped at a country, at institutional level, to make sure when this happens, we then respond, because there are many protocols in terms of co-location. How then do you bring back your services to operate? Those are the issues, and it is something that we must have an active conversation as a country, so that we are building the necessary resources to be able to respond. Because the question is always not whether you will be hit. The more we go online, the more we are exposed. And it's not unique to Kenya, it's a global trend. How then do we respond when we are hit?
I want to go back a bit when Eric started and he was reading some of the progress that we've made.
Yes.
But I wonder if citizens are informed when their data is collected, stored, or shared, whether there's transparency to it, because it almost, maybe it's a policy issue, but there's a sense that I don't know. My data lives in this world. I don't know when it's collected, when it's stored, when it's shared. How can people just be better informed about that? Perhaps many will say it speaks to transparency.
I think it's a responsibility of every data controller, whether government or public sector. And one, even as an office, as we embark on awareness, because we are not yet there, we've made progress. And I think 3 things are contributing to that. One, there's a very active and robust movement of data privacy advocacy. Both lawyers and techs, that is one. 2, we've seen enforcement actually pushing that need to know. We are seeing in our office receiving on a very regular basis. We are almost at 7,000 complaints, although some of them we don't receive them. When people see there has been a penalty, and compensation, they now become concerned, like the one we've seen on use of people's images. The third thing that is pushing this is also public, because they are demanding to know why is our data being collected. So that is pushing the conversation. I still believe we are not there yet. As an office, I envisage a time when issues around data protection becomes more. I would want to compare with health, because, for instance, in the height of COVID, we all knew the 6 things: keep distance, wear a mask, wash your hands. We would want that kind of conversation when it comes to personal data to happen in every single household, so that it becomes a reality for all of us. Because the truth of the matter is, I often say the genie is out of the bottle, that you can no longer use personal information as you wish. It is true we live in an era of capitalism surveillance. The truth is, even yourself, we are most times actually we are the menu.
The product,
we are the product, I would say that. But we really, but the only way to hold people accountable is by taking our own responsibility and asking questions from whoever, whether private or public, when our data is used.
Yes. We'll get into how much of our data, for example, the government has and where it's domiciled and all those questions. But I want to go back to the anti-finance bill protest last year. And your office put out a communication warning people against, of course, sharing personal data, because a lot of people were leaking MPs' phone numbers, senators, etc., any government official, basically. And it was, wasalimie. Now, that seemed a little tone deaf, because on one end, while that is, illegal, there was also clearly personal data being compromised to find people doing the abductions, because people are being located, when you put 2 and 2 together, there's no other way that whoever is abducting, whether it's state agencies or whoever, are finding you except by compromising your personal data. Can you speak to that? And have there been any investigations into exactly what kind of breaches into personal data have led to some of these abductions? Yeah, and also why only one side? Why stop sharing personal numbers for MPs, but not stop using personal data to abduct people?
I want to say that whichever the way we look at it, when it comes to personal data, there is no one who has the ultimate of using personal data irresponsibly, irrespective of who it is. I also must say that as an office, and that's an issue, a lot of our young people will often complain but they never get to pen and say, this has happened to me, can you investigate? Because also, as an office, we must be moved. If you look at our determinations, because it is quasi-judicial in nature, we embark on an investigation. When it's received on our desk, then we embark on that until the end. To say that it is expected by both public and private sector, no one is exempt. There are exemptions when it comes to certain issues, when it comes to matters of security, but when it comes to matters of human rights, it is expected that people are supposed to uphold when it comes to matters of privacy. It's unfortunate that the thought was that by issuing a statement out there, it looks like we were egemearing one side, but that was not the aim. The aim was to bring to awareness to people to know, irrespective of which position you hold in government, you really require privacy.
So you're unable to investigate without receiving formal complaints? I
think it's important to receive formal complaints. Then that way, because then how you see, it doesn't mean, there are cases where we've taken on Simoto investigation, which we have powers to do that as an office. But it's important because that's how we grow this space. It's how we grow space. It's how we make sure that this is what has happened, this is what we are doing, this is what we have, what action we have taken. And all the determinations we have had, we've received complaints, we've gone through, and we're not shy to actually issue fines as an office.
Are the mechanisms for lodging those complaints as straightforward? What does that look like?
They are actually, they're available. There are several. You can do it orally, you can reduce it to a paper, you can actually apply online. And I want to believe our services are available online, and we are able to and then embark and ask those kind of questions.
But I still do worry because it is a matter of public interest. You know, should we wait for the complaints to be lodged? But you know, it's clearly a matter of public interest. Should not be the onus of the data commissioner to find out why personal data is potentially being used to.
One of the things we've also done in terms of some of those kind of companies to actually embark on investigation of telecos to find out what they are doing in terms of that. But so far to date, any investigation we have done so far hasn't led us to actually then coming into those kind of conclusions.
So the telcos are clean so far, quote unquote.
Let me say this: at least the ones the kind of investigation we have embarked on telecos, it's not specific to that, but let me say we as an office has asked telecos for certain information which they have provided. Yes.
You're speaking more of a proactive approach, Mariam, as opposed to reactive. Like, share the information as early, the awareness. It's a matter of public interest. Disseminate it. Let's not wait for case-by-case issues to arise.
I think just because it's a matter of huge public interest. And I think the fact that people could clearly tell that their data was being compromised means that and there's an Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, that's the first buck, right? That clearly there's something happening here that is not within the law. Then it's your prerogative to investigate, even without having formal complaints lodged, if there's clear gaps as far as, you know, the security of our data and if it is being used by state agencies.
I hear you, Mariam, and it's not to say we are complacent as an office. If there are gaps that we have identified as an office, we remain open in terms of making sure we go further in terms of these issues.
Immaculate, what do security agencies, what access to our data do security agencies have?
Let me say, that's an interesting question. And it's not unique to security agencies. What happens in the practice across the globe when it comes to matters of national interest, and that is one of the exemptions we have under the Data Protection Act. Matters of national interest, whether it is terrorism, whether it is crime, whether they are actually exempt under the law to be able to access information from different players to be able to undertake the investigation.
So they can compel an entity, they can compel a telco, they can compel KRA, or they can compel the business registration service to give them information about me if they're investigating me, or about anyone.
They can compel, because even under the Data Protection Act, they enjoy such exemptions.
Do they have to come through you, or do they
they don't have to come through.
They don't have to justify to anybody.
They have exemptions under the Data Protection Act.
No justification at all.
They have said the assumption is that when they are doing that, there's a lawful basis under their law to be able to do that, but they don't have to come through us. Okay. And one of the things I'd also want to talk about is something that often is not discussed is that when it comes to data sharing, you will find in some laws there are provisions for data sharing across, and many times they will be under the law, it will be provided for under the law, and then therefore it allows those government agencies to actually share information across. Yes.
We're going to have a break shortly, but the direction I'm taking here is we watch movies, and in those movies we see police are investigating something, then they will go to a judge to get a warrant so that they can tap your phone or to start accessing your information. Does that a similar law apply in Kenya?
Let me
do the security agencies in Kenya require a third party to authorize them to access certain type of your data?
Not necessarily, especially when it has to do with crime, terrorism. They don't have to do that. Not necessarily, because, and even under the Data Protection Act, they enjoy such exemption when it's an issue of national interest.
And are there instances where you could ask them? So I see, maybe you are just investigating something. You know, there is somebody who's selling counterfeit goods in Gikomba. Everybody who was in Gikomba, you go to KRA and say, give me their data. You go to the banks and say, give me their bank statements. You go to BRS and say, give me their information. Can a police officer just decide, you know, I'm investigating people on Kimathi Street, give me everybody in Nation Media Group?
No, you can't do that. I've said, even though the Data Protection Act provides for exemption when it comes to security agencies, it's within certain angle. For instance, when it comes to terrorism, that is one of the clearly defined places where then they can actually then access the information.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll give us those other areas after the break. It's 26 minutes to 8. Our guest this morning is the Data Commissioner, Immaculate Kassait. How safe is your data? Everywhere. What questions do you have for her? You can share them on WhatsApp, yes, on Instagram as well, on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, where we are live streaming the show. Let's ask her all these questions, all these concerns that we've been having. Back shortly after the break. Our conversation is the safety of our data, and Data Commissioner Immaculate Kassait is our guest. Very many concerns and questions coming in on social media. Mariam, you have some.
Right. Quite a number. So there's someone asking, is the ODPC aware that government offices share our data and phone numbers with cons? Then Skeptic A1 is asking, is the ODPC aware of data brokers operating within Kenya who collect, aggregate, and sell personal data without consent? And if so, what steps are being taken to identify them? Does the ODPC have a forensic lab equipped to technically investigate data breaches and cyber incidents? That's also from Skeptic.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can start with those before they get overwhelming. Yeah.
I think the area of data brokerage, like you're saying, data is the new oil, is it's a growing industry. And that's why the office exists. I have to say, we can't be in every corner. So that is why it helps to actually file complaints to us. Then it helps us embark on an investigation. Like I said, we're in an era of capitalist surveillance. So the more data you have, the more you're likely to be profitable. But the more the reason why you need to be aware about your personal data. Do we have a lab? Yes, we do. We have, it may not be as elaborate in terms of being able to do forensic. That is why we are able to go to where there's a complaint of a data breach, also check and also confirm that actually there has been a data breach, so that we are not as elaborate, I have to say. And then I think, what was the other question, Mary?
The other one was that government offices share our data and phone numbers with cons.
I think that might be a sweeping statement. It's good to be factual also in terms of what has happened. So
here's an example on that one.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a government entity, but it's an entity where government has shareholding, power distribution company. You've gone and you've applied for power, and then you start getting calls from multiple people who are telling you, we'd like to sort you out, tumekukatia stima, or so and so. This is what Mugambi is saying. Recently, I gave my phone number to KPLC so that I'll be getting electricity bills. 1 week from then, I have received several fake KPLC staff calls attempting to con me, asking for bribes.
I'm hearing that for the first time, I have to say. But let me say, if that issue is prominent, is of concern, I would really encourage Mugambi to complain to us.
How?
We have an online application in terms of filing a complaint where you say...
Where is that?
It is on our website, www.odpc.go.ke. You will see complaint, filing a complaint, and you will see what is required of you, state what is the issue, where this happened, because it gives us facts in terms of further investigating.
How soon would Mugambi be able to hear back? What does that timeline look like?
We have very strict timelines. We have 90 days to be able to look at a matter, determine, and then also then make a determination on that issue.
But I have to go online to report that, to file a complaint.
You can also file a complaint with our office. We'll physically deliver. You can also send us an email. It's just that we encourage you to use the format of the form that is there, because then it's very specific under the law. What has been breached, what you'd like us to do, what remedy are you seeking?
The Mugambis, and many will be thousands and thousands. Is there capacity? Is there concern around the capacity to deal with what will likely be like just a wave of complaints lodged from every side of the country?
That of course can be overwhelming to any office. And what we do when we realize that an industry, there's a big complaint at times, is to issue guidance notes. Because at times you will notice that people do things because they don't understand. When you issue a guidance note, it generally guides the sector. And as a result, as an office, we've had so far 8 guidance notes released. We have another probably 10 that we'll be doing in the coming year to show, just guide people. One of the complaints that we have had frequently is about people entering buildings, the information being recorded. We have with us a guidance note on private security to guide them on what they're supposed to do. The other one that we've had is on digital lenders. We have guidance note on that. The other one, which was, I'll say, was overwhelming just 2 years ago, was on elections, where political parties were busy sending people SMSs. Because partly it's part of ignorance. Because for a long time sharing people's information was the vogue. But we gave a guidance note because they probably don't know. Some of these people don't know that, and even at times it's and in the case of third party, people share information with third party and they don't know what are the guardrails and what they're supposed to do or not what they're supposed to do. Yes.
I'm seeing the form. It is quite detailed. Particulars of the complainant, write your name, your phone number, your email address, your national ID, and those ones you must give. Particulars of the respondent, name of the respondent. What is respondent here?
The respondent is the other party.
The party that you're complaining about?
Yes.
Okay. Contact details of the respondent, individual, institution, date of occurrence of the alleged infringement. This is very legalese, Immaculate.
But that's what it is.
Can I have just a direct way of calling or sending a message somewhere and saying, I suspect my data has been breached, and then you can call me and ask me these questions more directly. Simplify this process for me, such a way that if I fichua kwa DCI, they don't tell us, write the nature of the... It's feature. There's a number you call, or there's an SMS or a short code you just call, and then they call you back, or you're speaking anonymously, or you want to give your details. I mean, if I just feel that my data has been breached, I've been receiving all these funny messages or funny calls, and I don't know who gave out my number, and I want to complain, I assume I should be complaining to you.
That's a short code that we can actually. It's a good feedback that we're getting, but also remember, the Data Protection Act, it provides for your rights as a data subject. So you see, because it will have consequentials, that when you complain, you'll tell us which right, and even compensation. You know, it cannot be just a phone call.
Chukwani statement. Nikiwa na issue niende kwa polisi kwa OB. They don't tell me to fill out this form.
Let's see if the person
a cop just takes a pen and tells me, tell your story. They write.
Yeah, what you said. Let's see. Yeah.
We have who on the line?
We have a caller on the line.
Nyongesa.
Nyongesa.
Yeah.
Okay, Nyongesa from Nairobi. Thank you for dialing into Fixing the Nation. What's your question or comment?
Good morning, Eric, Janet, Mariam. Good morning, Madam Commissioner.
Good morning, John.
My name is John Nyongesa, and I'm calling as a concerned Kenyan citizen and a business representative affected by what I strongly believe is a failure by your office to uphold the Data Protection Act. Let me background this. Our company, Upper Hill Investment Group, lodged a formal complaint, ODPC complaint 1856/2024, on November 13, 2024, with your office. And we were reporting that a fraudulent account had been opened at a major multinational bank using our KRA PIN and company registration details. This account had been operated for 11 months leading to KRA deducting over 1.8 million shillings in withholding tax. And that is 15% tax on interest alone, meaning transactions worth a few hundred millions were falsely attributed to our company, money we never transacted. And here's the shocking part. Our company has never at any one time had an account or any form of transaction with this bank. This raises a serious question. How did they even obtain our data in the first place? Now, Madam Commissioner, at the beginning of this show, you said, file a complaint, put it in writing. We did not make vague claim. We provided your office with all the evidence, including the bank's own written admission that a third party had opened the account using our company's details without authorization. That was in the evidence stack we gave you. We also pointed out that 2 years after the bank's admission, they are yet to inform us how they got our data, how they used it, where they have used it, and whether they have deleted it to prevent further harm to us. Now, 47 days after receiving our complaint, your office wrote us an email refusing to admit and investigate our complaint. That's on December 30th. Now, this is what shocked us. ODPC dismissed it without explaining how our complaint failed to meet the legal threshold, because we know what the Act says. You did not provide any appeal mechanism. Additionally, the email added a curious and strange instruction that we should not refile the case with ODPC for 6 months unless you have further information, unless we have further information. The ODPC also suggested that we take the matter to another authority, preferably the DCI, while there are clear provisions under Section 56 of the Data Protection Act requiring your office to investigate data breaches such as ours. Now, Madam, your office exists to protect Kenyans from unauthorized data use, but in this particular case, a case as clear as daylight, ODPC has turned a blind eye. Now, these are my questions, and it's important because I tried to get the officer who made the decision to reject our case, and I brought a letter to your office, which you received and which I got a copy of, which said all decisions are collective, which basically means I have no idea who made that decision from your office. But since you're here, I may as well ask. My first question is this. Madam Commissioner, our company has never had an account or any transaction with this bank. How did they obtain our data in the first place? And why is ODPC not interested in how this illegality happened? 2, ODPC received a written admission from the bank in our evidence stack, confirming that a third party had misused our data to open a fraudulent account. Why did ODPC still refuse to investigate? 3, your office claims this is a fraud case. I agree fraud is an issue here, but so is data misuse. This bank used our KRA PIN and company details to open a fraudulent account. Section 25 and 30 of the Data Protection Act prohibit unauthorized processing of data. Why is ODPC ignoring this part of the case? And in any case, the Data Protection Act 2019 does not require ODPC to wait for any other agency before investigating a clear case of data misuse. My fourth question, and I'm about to wind up. This bank is a part of a multinational group with operations across Africa. Their data policy, and Eric and Co, it's important that you actually read the small print whenever you're banking. Their data policy states that any customer data collected in one country can be shared across their affiliate worldwide. Does ODPC realize by failing to act in our case, they could have allowed a multi-country data breach to go unchecked? And my final question, if ODPC refuses to investigate, even when they are provided with the direct, clear evidence, and even an admission by the person who's offending the other, should Kenyans assume that ODPC has one standard for powerful corporations and another for ordinary Kenyans? Madam Commissioner, with all due respect, your office was given concrete written proof of this data breach. Your decision to dismiss a complaint without investigating is sending a very dangerous message that multinational corporations can misuse private data, expose it across borders, and ODPC will do nothing.
John,
so
very
I'll
good
ask
questions.
Let me finish one last thing. You're on a show called Fixing the Nation. If you stand by fairness and you take your oath of office seriously, can you commit to reopening this complaint and investigating this bank? Or should Kenyans conclude that ODPC's mandate is optional when dealing with powerful corporations?
Stay on the line, John. Let her respond to you directly.
Right.
Thank you, John. I want to start by saying I hear you and my sincere sympathy for feeling that the office did not address your concern. Two issues I want to say. This, I'll go back because I don't have the details, so it would be difficult for me to commit to this kind of what exactly happened. But for me, one of the issues I quickly pick, our mandate is on data subjects. A corporate does not fall within that category. It shifts.
What's that? What's a data subject?
A data subject is an individual. The reason why the Data Protection Act was picked is the rights of an individual are violated. Me as Immaculate. A company does not fall within that description of an individual. It is a company. It's not. It cannot suffer the violation of a personal data. That is one.
Okay.
So that could be one of the reasons why the data. It's true. It's under the law that we expected to refile the complaint after 6 months. Having said that, because I don't have the details, because what we have done, and one of the places that flags us in terms of identifying where this then falls is an audit. You undertake an audit or an investigation of this company to see whether they reported the data breach. I don't have the details of which company it is. I would have to go back. But what we have done as an office, every time we receive a complaint about a certain institution, that becomes one of the places we focus on in terms of conducting an audit. And if because we have audits identified for this year for different, both private and public sector, whether they are multinationals or others, I can't commit because I don't know which one. But if it is not one of those that has been prioritized for audit, this is good information that then we can take back and then relook at that case.
Okay.
But the requirements of 6 months, it must be an individual. It's not a company. And even when you report on behalf of somebody, you must then say you're doing it on behalf of. Because remember, these are personal rights, not company rights. And description of who a person is, it is a human being.
So a company, if a company's data is breached or violated, that company has no recourse with your office.
In this case, when you look at it, and the reason why it was referred to cross-border, because we have the powers to also refer when it's a fraud. And we have seen that also. When it's a fraud, then the proper institution that is empowered to do that is actually DCI. It falls outside the scope and ambience of the Data Protection Act. But that does not mean we cannot undertake an audit of that company or investigate that company on a data breach.
Are you willing to take up the case of John? In fact, like having a meeting with John to just understand the nature of complaints, the kind of feedback that he got from your office, and what other steps or help you can offer?
I often say, as public officers, our first role is to actually serve the public. Yes, we are willing to listen to what exactly happened. But it's also important I clarify in terms of what the legal processes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in that case then, when the business registration services was breached, my company cannot complain.
It is, you can't
Are
complain.
you taking it up because the data that has been breached also goes to the shareholders and directors of that company?
We are taking it up because right there, their personal information. There is phone numbers, there is somebody's personal name, but not a company. And that is the distinction that as I leave this show, it's important for people to understand. We don't invest, it's not about the company, it's about the data subject, the human being. The right to, you cannot have rights as a company, but you can have rights as Janet.
An individual.
Yes. Not Janet's company, it is Janet. Yeah. Or Mariam, it's not her.
Right.
Okay.
It's her as a person. The right to privacy is breached to the individual, not the company.
I know John has heard you, and the commitment here is that John can reach out to you and your office, come and have a meeting with you. And then review what information is received so far from your office and how much further you can assist on this particular one. Thank you, and thank you to that, John.
Hey, time is really an issue. Wangeshi, please let us know if we can just kidogo. I want to talk about SHA specifically. The fact that the Auditor General just said that SHA is not in the control of the Kenyan government, right? We are more or less renting or leasing this system out. So the data of Kenyans, biodata, medical data, personal data, is all in the hands of a consortium of companies. What does that mean from a data protection standpoint? Is that legal? Let's begin with that. And what protections exist now for Kenyans and for our data, given that SHA is,
and just to add on to that, it's the same with e-Citizen. There are third parties who are not state agencies or public officers who are dealing with the e-Citizen platform, which contains our personal data.
Let me say this, that in the case, I'll address those two cases. Let me say, in terms of what is important when it comes to when data is being hosted by a third party, is what we call third party agreements. That is absolutely important. In the case of SHA, they have reached out to us, and I'll say one of the advantages we have, which many government agencies don't have, is the Data Protection Act is seen as a proactive, not necessarily a reactive. That is why we have what we call data protection impact assessment, which is done 6 months before the embarkment of a project, because it gives the company an opportunity to look through what are the risks, how do you mitigate the risk. In the case of SHA, they've written to us with data protection impact assessment, which we have assessed, identified gaps, and also beyond that, one of the things we have insisted to them is when it comes to access to third party, they must get consent. And they have shown us in terms of consent form what is going to be. We've insisted that must be there. That does not mean
the third party accessing the data.
Yes, that party, because you see what the regulations provide is that they can access government databases. But when it comes to third party, they really must get consent from the patient. They really must get consent. You say, this is what I want. That we have insisted. Having said that, because the truth is, and it's good to say when people have made certain effort, they've reached out to us, they've undertaken data protection impact assessment. It does not mean that we cannot then go and do a post-audit. One of the places we have identified to do an audit is actually the digital health information. That one is something we have scheduled as an office to undertake an audit. So of important, when it comes to e-Citizen, as long as you have third-party data sharing agreement, because remember, data protection identified what we say a data controller, the person who collects the information, but there's also a data processor, the person who's on behalf they're processing data for. So it envisages a place where the information is shared across platform, where information is shared by third parties. But you must put in place the necessary framework, like a data sharing code, to make sure if this information is shared, certain aspects are taken into account.
In those two institutions, do those exist? The data sharing frameworks?
They have shared with us at least
third-party agreement.
That party agreement, we have seen the third-party agreement for SHA, and we have also insisted on the third-party agreement for e-Citizen.
So you haven't seen the third-party agreement for e-Citizen?
We haven't, I don't have in my custody, but I have the data protection impact assessment from e-Citizen.
Which indicates that there'll be a third-party access.
Which, yes, that is also, they will be entering into agreements with third-party.
So according to the law that establishes your office, if you have not then authorized them to go ahead, are they in breach of the law? When there's a third party who is accessing my data and I have not signed any consent for a third party to access my data, in the case of SHA and in the case of e-Citizen?
I think that is jumping the gun. Because you see, then we'll be coming here to hang people in a public crucifix, which then, but I won't say that.
Immaculate, today, people are going to hospital.
Correct.
And they're giving their data, which is going to the digital health information platform.
Correct.
And that is being processed by some third party somewhere.
Yes.
This patient is not necessarily signing a consent form. So there's a breach of their data when a third party person accesses that data without the form that you told them to give me as a patient.
Without their knowledge.
What I'm saying, let me clarify, Eric. We have said to SHA that it's important for them when they are doing, let me be specific, when they are doing mean testing, they must get a third party consent form, mean testing.
Yes.
We have also said to them For any sort of agreements they enter with third party, they must have third party agreement. We have seen third party agreements in the case of SHA shown as part of their data protection impact assessment. That is what I would like to clarify.
So if patients are not filling out anywhere, filling out any form,
and their information was accessed.
And the information is accessed, especially because means testing is going on now in the registration of SHA.
Yes.
Then they are flouting your own advice.
If that were to happen, then that would be flaunting, because consent is an important aspect of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I go onto the e-citizen platform and I do not fill out any form giving consent for a third party to process my data that I'm putting in, then that's also in violation.
Let me say this, because third party consent as an issue is only one of the lawful bases. Then it's important when I live here to clarify that, because people have hanged on to consent, that if you have not asked for my consent, then you can't access my information. These are the 6 reasons why somebody might access. If there's a lawful basis, for instance, under the law, it says, this one is allowed to access my information for a service of public interest. That is one. Okay. 2, contractual obligation. If there's a contract between me and you, that's another reason. 3, there is for what we call legitimate interest. So there are 6. Consent is not the only one. I must clarify that. It only comes now when it is, all these others are unavailable, and therefore you go for consent. Yeah, it's not the only one, because at times, and I've seen that when it comes to people sharing information, and then people say, but they didn't ask for my consent. They don't necessarily have to ask for your consent, because there is a lawful basis for them to access, and especially when it comes to public institution, that at times is written in their law.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Immaculate, we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to clarify what as an office we do. And I want to reiterate, as an office, we remain open. We remain open to the public, and if there are areas of improvement, we remain open to feedback as an office on areas that are improvement, because data is the new oil, and we need to just make sure that it's being done in the right way.